Thank you for your story. Hopefully some good can come out of it. My question is about kind of the broader story. As I recall, there were photos that came out in the media showing John Walker Lindh completely beat up, and yet that very public part of the story seems to have gone in the memory hole as well. I recall, fairly recently writing a letter to the editor and just asking about it, where this guy was tortured, why American citizen, what's going on here? So I'm wondering if you can comment sort of on the media.
Right. There was definitely a hysteria surrounding the John Walker Lindh case, and the picture you're referring to was a famous trophy photo of him in which he's naked and gagged and blindfolded and has a shed head written across the blindfold, and he's bound and strapped to a board. And that photo circulated around the world. You can still find it on the internet, and it was right after 9/11, and no one flinched. I mean, there were a few people who may have been taken aback by it, but when we saw the same thing from Abu Ghraib in 2004, there was a very, very different reaction. And I know within the Justice Department, when Lindh was first captured, it was the sentiment of, let's hang him high. How can we try him for treason because it carries a death penalty? How can we get him tried in the Fourth Circuit, which is very conservative compared to the Ninth Circuit, which tends to be more liberal and would have been more logical because he was from California. But they tried him in the Fourth, which was a mile from the Pentagon, and on the anniversary of 9/11. And there was a huge hysteria because he was the first person captured really in the war on terrorism. And it made it even worse that he was an American. And yeah, they tortured him and not many people blinked.
Oh, I'm Rosalind Lacey McLennan. I was a journalist in New Jersey, writing for a northern New Jersey newspaper, and I went through something, of retaliation, where I know what it feels like, to make it short, and I commend you for your courage, for standing up. I mean, it was so relatively mild what I went through compared to this. My question is, if this John Walker Lindh, he's serving 20 years now, what was his choice? It was death?
Initially, the government had been seeking 3 counts that carried the death penalty against him. So when we look back at it now, in hindsight, people are like, gosh, why did his attorney ever agree to that? 20 years, it's a draconian sentence because he pled guilty to 2 very minor technical charges.
But 20 years?
20 years. And it seems draconian now, but when you look back at this guy who was facing, 3 counts that carried the death penalty and was about to be tried 1 mile from the Pentagon on the anniversary of 9/11, there was still very much this hysteria about it, and he very much was scapegoated as being the, even though the judge himself ruled that he had nothing to do with the death of CIA agent Johnny Michael Spann, at the time the administration was very happy to kind of fan the flames of that rumor.
What are his prospects of parole or of getting out? Or?
Nothing in this administration, maybe in the next. And I also think, again, there's new evidence that, just came out a couple of weeks ago that I think could bolster his petition for commutation. But again, people ask me, what are your prospects? I'm still under investigation by the DC Bar, and it's been nearly 5 years. And people say, well, what about now? I said, I'm not confident that anything will happen until 2009.
Yeah, I downloaded this case, by the way. I believe I got this on FFF.org, or I'm not sure where I got it, but I brought it. So it's just a coincidence. So I'm glad to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too.
I think you may have already answered this, as I just wanted to ask what the status of his case was right now.
Yeah, the status right now, I think he emailed with his father the other day. And I think he was still in solitary confinement. He's in prison, he's done about 4 years of the 20-year sentence. He's no longer a teenager, he's a young man, but he's in jail for 20 years, and as part of the plea bargain, he agreed not to challenge his sentence. So he can't appeal the sentence. He can petition for commutation, which is what he's done. And maybe it's a good thing that they haven't ruled on that, and that petition is kind of flapping in the wind right now. It's not fun to be kind of flapping in the wind, but I think a lot of us are just sort of treading water, knowing that nothing's going to happen in the near term with us. So I think with the new administration, he could potentially get the sentence reduced to time served. It's worth noting that the two other people who were caught alongside Lindh doing the exact same thing, Yasser Hamdi, also an American citizen. We litigated his case all the way up to the Supreme Court. The administration lost, and he was set scot-free back to Saudi Arabia, which is a hotbed of terrorism. The other guy was David Hicks, an Australian, also caught, he's a kangaroo skinner by profession, also caught in this uprising at Mazar-e-Sharif on the Taliban side. He was held at Guantanamo Bay for 5 years, but then they released him, and he was sentenced by the Australian courts to 9 months in jail, not including the 5 years in the black hole, otherwise known as Guantanamo Bay. So you have 3 men with completely different outcomes, and if part of the penological purpose is proportionality, I mean, that's what we're taught in law school, proportionality, to have 3 guys who did the exact same thing, one being set free, one serving 20 years, and the other serving 9 months, it's just not fair, I think, by anyone's definition.
I'm Bart Fraser from the Future Freedom Foundation here, and I was wondering if you could please tell us if you have handled any other ethics cases pertaining to the war on terrorism, and also if you could please give us a synopsis of how ethics cases are handled in the Justice Department.
Right now, as far as I know, my former office is, they're not dealing, I mean, as I told Jane Mayer in the article she did for the New Yorker, I think ethics went out the window when the war on terrorism started. So ethics, which involves following the Constitution, I don't believe in only following, Article 2 seems to be the only part of the Constitution our president has read, and the Bill of Rights seem to have flown out the window along with the ethics. I don't think much is going on in the ethics unit at all. I think they're probably stacking styrofoam cups and collecting a paycheck. In terms of my work on other terrorism cases, yes, I basically made it a lifelong crusade. It's interesting, me and the attorney with whom I originally corresponded, I met him, strangely, for the first time at an anti-torture conference. And I'm like, good job, Justice Department. You made 2 people who were career government attorneys, totally anti-government, and totally, I was the biggest flag-waving, government wears a white hat, we do the right thing, fresh-faced kid out of law school into the honors program, and, how amazing it was to walk into court and have the imprimatur of the United States behind me. But I would be ashamed to do that now. I don't preclude government service someday if it can be done in a certain way, but not like this. In terms of my own personal work, I ended up working with the ABA Task Force on Treatment of Enemy Combatants.